Hello, everyone. Welcome to this panel discussion and Q&A session on applying for the Gates Cambridge Scholarship. I'd like to briefly begin by introducing the scholarship. The Gates Cambridge Scholarship Program was established in 2000 by a donation of $210 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to the University of Cambridge. Each year, Gates Cambridge offers around 80 full-cost scholarships to applicants from countries outside the UK to pursue a full-time postgraduate degree in any subject available at the University of Cambridge. Approximately 2/3 of these awards will be offered to PhD students, with approximately 25 awards being available in the US round and 55 available in the international round. Today, I'm joined by a wonderful selection of scholars and recent alumni who have volunteered to share some advice and experiences from their own application process. If I could please have everyone introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Emma. I am a second year, almost third year, PhD in psychiatry. I'm part of the 2018 cohort and I applied from the US.
Hi everyone, I'm Marina. I study French literature, about to begin the third year of my PhD as well, the early modern period specifically. And I'm part of the 2018 cohort and I also applied from the US.
Hi everyone, I'm Vineet. I'm an alum. I did the MPhil in Energy Technologies. I was also part of the 2018 cohort and I applied from India.
My name's Hafsa. I'm doing a PhD in geography going into my second year. I'm from the 2019 cohort and I'm from Pakistan.
Yes, so I'm Alex. My subject was the MPhil in Engineering for Sustainable Development of the cohort 2018-2019, and I applied from Canada.
We'll begin with a panel discussion on various steps in the application process. So just a quick overview of the application process. You submit a Gates Cambridge application at the same time as you apply to the university itself. The scholarship application is built into the university application. The department you have applied to ranks applicants and forwards them to the Gates Cambridge Trust, and the trust shortlists from that list and invites shortlisted candidates for an interview, after which a scholarship is offered. We'll begin our discussion by talking a little bit about timing. At the time this discussion is being recorded, the dates for the 2021 cohort application haven't yet been posted to the website. But the first question is, what sorts of things does an applicant need to consider in terms of timing? So when it comes to preparing and sending in the application. Marina?
So there are several things to consider with timing. First of all, that the timeline for applicants from the US and applicants from other nations are different. The US application is typically due in early October, although the dates specifically shift. And then I believe the international applications are due typically in December. In both of those cases, you want to be thinking pretty far ahead because you're not the only person responsible for your application. You also need 3 recommendation letters, 2 of which need to be academic. And then there's a third letter specifically for the Gates application. So you want to give your referees plenty of time to write those letters on your behalf. And also if you're applying to do a PhD in particular, but also an MPhil, it can be helpful to have contacts at the university. So applying for a PhD, you want to have a good sense of who your supervisor will be. And this is the academic who is your primary mentor. So establishing those contacts is something I would suggest doing several months ahead of submitting your application.
Another thing you might want to bear in mind is that some departments have a rolling admissions deadline. So in that case, it's better to get your application in as early as possible. You also want to consider all of the components of the application. So like Marina said, at the departmental level, there might be a research proposal and reference letters and transcripts to submit. But beyond that, there's some Gates Cambridge specific material, which we'll discuss further on in this discussion. Another question is, when should you begin preparing in relation to a given deadline? So how many roughly weeks or months in advance did you begin preparing and why? Emma?
So I am probably going to be on the earlier end of the continuum, but I actually started applying 6 months before. So one thing that I didn't mention in my introduction is not only am I a GATE scholar, I am also a failed GATES applicant. So I have tried twice to apply to GATES and only got it my second time around. I think one of the big things that I changed was that I allowed a lot more time in the second round to develop my essays. By the time I saw draft number 10, I knew that I was just about finished. But if you don't give yourself time to really work on those essays, workshop them, get feedback, both your research proposal and your GATES essay, I think you're at a significant disadvantage. So really the earlier that you can start, the better, in my opinion.
Another thing to note is that because the GATES Cambridge application is built into the university application, practically speaking, you might want to begin the application as soon as you can and save it and upload material to it or add to it as you progress with your preparation. Vineet?
Hi, yeah, I was probably on the later end, but I also had my, like the GATE statement ready like 2 to 3 weeks, like finalized before the application deadline. And that was just because I wanted to get as many eyes looking at it as possible. So I got in touch with the fellowships office at my university. So if there's someone like that you can reach out to, or past alumni from your school who have received it. I know a lot of GATES alumni are often like willing to look at essays if you reach out to them via email. So it's always nice to get feedback and have that polished, because that's the most important component for describing why you meet all the criteria of the scholarship.
Let's move on to department and supervisor, because that's an important step in the application process. The first question is, how can applicants determine if a department is right for them? Vineet? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's really important, in my opinion, to focus most of your search on the supervisor, and I'm happy for others to say something else. But I am part of a department that's quite different overall than my main area of research. So for me, the most important thing was finding a good mentor who had the exact strand of research that I was interested in rather than the department as a whole. So my main research is in public mental health, for example. And even though I'm in the psychiatry department, most of the psychiatry department, I would say, is focused around brain imaging and biology sides of mental health. And so I've been able to be quite successful with just having a supervisor that's really focused on my area of interest. So I would spend most of your time worrying about the supervisor and how they fit your particular interests, needs, and not so much, I would say, on the wider department as a whole, like you might for undergrad. That's also a PhD perspective, so Vineet might have a very different MPhil perspective.
Marina, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was going to say, from the MPhil perspective, there are some courses that are known as taught courses, which means that they have they place a heavier emphasis on taking courses and submitting coursework as opposed to doing a significant amount of independent research. And in such a course, your relationship with a supervisor might be de-emphasized. And also there are many different courses where you don't get to choose your supervisor. They might be assigned based on what topic you choose to pursue for any given paper or project. So if that is the case, it will be difficult for you to hone in on a particular supervisor, but that doesn't mean you cannot contact academics in the department to learn more about the course. Typically, each department will have an academic in charge of graduate admissions or graduate administration, and each course also might have an individual academic who is responsible for administering that course, and they can share with you information about the syllabus, the readings, the course structure as well.
Vineet, if you have something to
Yeah, echoing what Marina said, I did an MPhil and my course was 50% taught and 50% research. So in that case, that you don't really get to choose what department, you basically go by what course appeals to you. And so while deciding on a course, you'd want to look at the mix between research and taught coursework. And also, if you're interested in a PhD, how easy is it to transition to a PhD from that course? And in terms of research, like what Marina said, sometimes you don't have flexibility, but in my case, I did have a lot of flexibility. I could even work with professors outside the engineering department in like industrial, the IFM, or the chemical engineering department. So it really depends on the course. So you can look at the program websites to learn more.
Just building upon what all of you have said is it might also be worthwhile if you're a PhD student to have a look at who else is in the department, because then you can also ask those professors to be on your advisory committee and help you. They're going to help you shape your project throughout the first year. Other considerations might be events that the department holds, so seminars and lectures, how often, and about what sort of topics. And also you might want to look at research groups in the department, because some departments are clustered by research theme. Marina?
Just an additional thought to emphasize what Emma and Hafsa have said about identifying individuals. Hafsa mentioned earlier that sort of the first step in the application process is that you're vetted by the department and they choose whether or not to pass your application on to Gates. So it really does behoove you to make contacts in the department because they're going to be the ones who are sort of the first barrier toward your admission into the program.
Or advocate to help you get on that short list as well.
The second question we've kind of touched upon, but let's go into a little bit more detail about how applicants can go about choosing a potential supervisor. What are some of the things to consider there? So I'll begin. The key here is just to do your research. You want to read through their research interests. You want to email them with a draft, or even better, a fully formed research proposal. And in the email, you want to draw connections between your work and theirs. Another thing you might want to do is email their current students to sort of ask about what kind of supervisor they are and see if you have the same kind of work style. And then in some departments, you might also get a chance to be interviewed by them, by your potential supervisor. So you can also ask them questions there. Emma?
And beyond the formal interview, I would highly recommend asking in your introduction email, or once you've had a small email chain with that person, whether they'd be willing to meet over Skype or over Zoom, or even just a simple phone call, because I think you can learn a lot about their expectations, their interests, and how that overlaps with your own much better in that kind of way than you can ever do in an email.
Marina?
And also, if the first person you contact for some reason can't take you on, or they feel that their research interests don't quite mesh with yours, they may know of somebody who's better suited to be your supervisor. So do feel free to ask them if they could refer you to somebody else in the department or even a different department.
Let's move on to Gates criteria now. So there's 4 things that the Gates Cambridge Scholarship looks for in applicants. The first one is academic excellence. So the first question is, how can applicants display academic excellence as part of their application? Vineet, do you want to go first?
In addition to talking about this, like the kind of research and coursework you've taken in your undergraduate, as part of your essay, I think for my department, the engineering department, the main way they gauged academic excellence was just looking at your transcript. So they actually did place a lot of emphasis on the grades, and the person who interviewed me even mentioned it during the interview, like certain courses that he thought like it was good that I had gotten a certain grade in. So they really did, it may vary by department how much they emphasize grades, but at least for the engineering department, in terms of the ranking, they did place a heavy emphasis on your GPA and even like, the kinds of grades you got.
And then also beyond GPA and transcripts, you might want to think about the reference letters. You know, if a certain professor is writing a reference letter for you, you might ask them to sort of play up your academic strengths. And then also any previous awards or scholarships that you've won are certainly going to help in the academic excellence department as well. The second criteria is a reason for choice of course. So applicants should have a clear justification for why a particular course was right for them. What are some of the reasons that a course might be appealing to someone? Marina?
Yeah, I think why a course and also why that course at Cambridge is helpful. And one of the wonderful things about being a graduate student here is Cambridge has really extensive resources across so many different departments. So if you can identify a particular resource that would benefit your research, that is wonderful. And for me, for example, I'm in the humanities, but Cambridge has a particular collection in its library that very few other libraries have. And that was a draw for me, but I'm sure it's the same with certain technologies and certain labs.
Another reason for why a course might be really great for you is it might fit well with your future plans, or it might be really relevant to the field of industry that you've been working in or that you would like to work in, or maybe you're just really interested in digging deeper into a research topic that fascinates you as well. So those are all valid reasons for choosing a particular course at Cambridge. The third sort of pillar that the scholarship looks at is people who demonstrate a commitment to improving the lives of others. So I just wanted to ask, what does that mean to you? Emma?
This was probably the biggest difference between my first application and my second application, I would say, is really learning how to write about what I'm passionate about in a way that shows that I'm passionate about it. So my PhD is focused on how we can identify mental health difficulties better in schools. And so I was able to, in my second successful application, more successfully weave in my past work that I've done in educational justice and in volunteering and in tutoring that I hadn't in a way that was as convincing in my first application. And another thing that I would really recommend you do, this is just in general, but also in terms of my application, is have people who are close to you who are not academic read your personal essay, which is where you predominantly will talk about this type of social leadership, and see how it comes across to them. So my most helpful feedback was one of my friends that I work with, and I said, I want you to read this like you know me and not in an academic way. And she said, this does not come across as you at all. You know, you need to make it so flat. You need to make it as cheerful as you are. And that really helped transform the way that I wrote about the work that I've done in the past, I think, in a way that really helped elevate my application.
Vinny, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because my program was energy technologies. So I got some feedback on my initial statement, and the main thing was not just talking about like why I was interested in it from a technical standpoint, but also bringing in the other issues like social and environmental justice that are connected to clean energy and climate change. So I tried to loop that in and really make that a part to address, like, I think Gates does play emphasis on the social aspect of like technologies as well. And also, again, talking about why I grew to be interested in that area from like personal experiences and the kinds of volunteering and other extracurricular activities that related to that displayed my commitment in the past as well. Yeah.
Marina?
And I think Emma and Vinny both spoke about really illustrating how your past experiences tie into that criterion, but I also think it's helpful to think about discussing how the course or project you plan to do could serve people in the future, right? What are you going to gain from it that better equips you to contribute in this way?
So I'll just add to that a bit. For me, a commitment to improving the lives of others means that a person has to have a strong commitment for the larger good. And that means going beyond academic excellence and sort of thinking about how your research will have an impact beyond your time at Cambridge. If you're a science student, beyond sort of the four walls of the lab, or beyond fieldwork if you're in the social sciences. Because I feel that the Gates Cambridge Scholarship funds ideas that are going to make a difference. And that's what that means to me. Now, the fourth criteria for the scholarship is a capacity for leadership. So my next question is, at the application stage, how can you show a capacity for leadership? Emma?
I think that the place other than your CV where you're most able to do this, again, is in that Gates specific essay. And one piece of advice that I got from my undergraduate institution was that it's often quite helpful to combine the former criteria about commitment to improving the lives of others and your leadership criteria, if you can, to talk about what is sometimes referred to as social leadership, for example. So as my undergrad told me, they do not care whether you were the head of the opera company. They would much rather hear about how you were a leader in a way that was socially conscious or that also improved the lives of others.
I'll add to that. You can also give examples. So when it comes to the personal statement, whether if you've held an executive position in any student society, say it. If you've developed a startup, play that up. Any volunteering experience that you've done. Another thing to sort of mention here is that everyone is a leader in their own way. Not everyone is a natural leader. But if you can highlight how your ideas brought a change in the way that a certain group of people did something or thought about something, then at least to me, that's leadership. Alex, if you want to add something.
Yeah, to build on what you said, Hafsa, is about this thing of everybody has their own way of leading, and it's not just about building a list of all the things or all the roles you've held. But I think one way that I did is just bring a very specific story and storytell it about, like specific people, specific environment, and make it sound very like personal and compelling. And I think that speaks more than just a list of, like accomplishments or things like that. So yeah.
Vineet?
Yeah, just adding on to that, when I wrote my application, rather than including a bunch of maybe experiences or roles, I focused on an organization that I've been part of throughout my undergrad and how I grew within that organization to take on a leadership role. And I focused my essay on that. And it happened to also be related to environmentalism. So it kind of brought all the pieces together, but that could be another approach to take.
Vineet and Alex, you've actually provided a nice segue into the next section of the discussion, which is Gates specific material. So the first thing that we're going to talk about here is the Gates Cambridge statement, which is a 500-word explanation for why you're applying for the scholarship and how you meet the 4 criteria that we were just talking about. So what sorts of things did you highlight in your statements? Alex told a story. Vineet sort of talked about his previous leadership experience. Emma, what did you do?
I tried to find the red thread through everything that I've done from university and before, and how it related to what I was doing now and how it would relate to what I was doing in the future. So really a heavy emphasis, kind of like Alex said, maybe not so much a story as just a narrative of here's where I've been, here's why I need this next to get where I'm going.
I'm just going to pitch in here with something that I actually found on the Gates Cambridge website. They advise that you use your background, achievements, experiences, and future aims to show how you'd be a good fit with the program. In my own experience, I also use the storytelling strategy that Alex was talking about. I think that's really appealing for someone who's, having to go through a pile of different applications. It's easier to read as well.
And you do have the resume to make sure that all of those things that you want people to see, that list that Alex was talking about, you have that. That's the CV. So you really can reserve the personal statement for something that is a little bit more meaningful.
That's right. Emma, yeah, you have something else to add?
Yeah, just to add on that, I think I really only touched on about a quarter of the things on my CV. So that was another big difference from my failed application to my successful one, is instead of trying to make your personal statement into a list of look how great I am, focus instead in depth on a few things, really showcase your passion, show how you've made a change or you've been changed by something. That's going to be much more valuable because, as Marina says, they have your CV, they don't need it in Pris format.
Vineet?
Yeah, I took a maybe slightly different approach with the statement. It's a very short statement, 500 words, but I chose to break it up into 4 short paragraphs. And I actually tried to make the focus of each paragraph like hitting one of the criteria. So, and then I ended with I think my last paragraph was like commitment to improving the lives of others. So, so the reader kind of could quickly gauge oh, each paragraph is hitting one of the criteria, but you don't have to take that approach, but I found that worked well for me.
And I guess even if you don't want to sort of split your statement into the different criteria itself, you could just have a checklist on the site to make sure that you've actually included those things, because at the end of the day, you're being sort of assessed for those according to those criteria. Let's talk a bit now about the Gates-Cambridge reference. So in addition to the 2 academic references for admission, the Gates-Cambridge applicants submit a reference about their fit specifically with the scholarship. So I just wanted to ask, who did you ask and how did you prepare or brief them if you did? Marina?
So when I was applying for the Gates, I was working as a high school teacher, and I asked my department chair to write that reference for me. So it was an employer, could also be an academic mentor, or someone in your professional life. For me, it had been a couple of years since I had graduated. And I thought it was pretty important, given the emphasis on the Gates criteria, that my referee be well acquainted with those things so that he could specifically speak to them on my behalf. And I think that, so that part of the preparation was highlighting where on the website he could find that information, or better yet, printing out and giving it to that person, and asking them to try and touch on those points specifically.
Alex?
Very similar to Marina. I was with Engineers Without Borders, and I reached out to one of the executives to ask if they could write my personal reference. And similar to my academic reference, what I did is I built a reference package, basically telling them, updating them about my life, a little bit, like basically sharing with them my personal statement that I wanted to share, and also like my updated CV and some of the key things that I thought would be useful to them. So a little bit like, Marina, I just printed out what I thought would be useful. In my case, I just send them, like an actual PDF of a few pages long, just so that they have all the information. And some of them came back with a few, with a few follow-up questions, and just like make sure they have everything they can in their hands. They need in their hands to serve you as you'd want to.
Yeah, I actually ended up also submitting an academic reference for the Gates. I chose a professor that I knew really well. I had known for like 3 years at that point, taken multiple classes and research. So I chose him to write the more personal Gates statement as opposed to the standard references. But obviously I also provided some more background on my extracurricular activities in my CV, provided him with a draft of my Gates statement. So yeah, I think it could be an academic person as well, as long as I spent a lot of time talking to him about my research interests and my goals. So I thought that he would be a good fit for it.
Emma?
And I also had an academic reference, and mine was the dean of my undergraduate college. And my particular reason for picking him was that he had seen me change throughout 4 years and really grow as a person. And I thought that was a valuable perspective that a lot of other people wouldn't be able to provide. So I thought it was quite useful to have him write mine.
I think a really important theme that's sort of emerging from everything that everyone has said so far is that and this is also on the Gates Cambridge website, is the important point to remember is that the referee must understand what the scholarship is about and must be able to write authoritatively about how you meet the criteria. It's essential that the referee is fully briefed about the scholarship, and it's useful when they use specific examples about how you meet each of the 4 criteria that we discussed earlier. Now, since we're sort of going through this in the chronological order that an applicant would go through this process in, let's move on to the interview now. So how did you prepare for the interview? Emma?
I asked as many people as humanly possible to interview. My mother interviewed me at one point. And honestly, the best part of it is that your mother will come up with questions that none of your colleagues or mentors will come up with. But that some of them were not too far off from what I was actually asked on the day. Like one of my questions was, what's your favorite viola piece and why? So, you know, while your academic mentors are focused on your research and your methods and your this and your that, getting a wide diversity of people to help you prepare, I thought was the key to doing well in the interview.
Marina?
Something to keep in mind as well is that it is a panel interview, so you'll be interviewed by multiple people at once, and I found it quite helpful to simulate that because that was a new experience for me. Most of my job interviews had been either one-on-one or two-on-one, ditto for undergraduate applications, and facing 3 or 4 people is daunting in a different way, and learning how to sort of distribute your focus between them. So if you can get a little panel of friends or academic mentors or colleagues, I would highly recommend it.
Alex?
Yeah, I think one thing that I did the day before actually was just like go for long walks, and I had the chance to go to Cambridge for my interview, so that was like a real privilege. But I think just make sure that you're relaxed, that you get your head cleared out, your mind cleared out. But I think some of the things as well is, yeah, practice. But also keep in mind, it could go in any direction. It's a short interview. It was 15 to 20 minutes. It didn't go in the direction that I had practiced for. So it's like they just want to know you, and it could go in any direction. And I think one thing that, at least for me, in the case of an MPhil course, they ask specific question as this course, or like what specific modules was I interested in, and what would I want to like look into. So yeah, be very informed about, you know, the program you want to apply to, and just, yeah, don't be scared to be specific, and link it with your specific objectives. Yeah.
Marina, did you have anything else to add?
Just regarding what Alex said about specifics, I was sort of expecting that I would be fielding a lot of questions about my compatibility with the Gates criteria, and I'm sure that does come up frequently in interviews. My interview, however, went a little bit different, and I was asked really specific questions about my research proposal, down to individual words and phrases that I used. And this was applying for a PhD, so I think the research proposal is pretty heavily emphasized. But definitely know your proposal inside and out. If you cited any material, maybe refresh it a little prior to that interview so that you can speak about it in an informed way.
Vinny?
Yeah, but the first thing was just like a logistical thing. So I had to do it over Skype. And being on a Skype interview with a panel was not something that I've ever done. So I actually practiced that with some friends, just, I don't know, like eye contact and making sure that I'm conveying well to the panel. So that's one thing. The second thing was just, you get to know beforehand, a few days beforehand, who's on your panel. So I want to make sure what their research specialties were. And it was a very interesting conversation. They asked me like about my experiences, but also like my general thoughts on like climate change and the clean energy transition. So yeah, it does help to like look into what the expertise of your panelists are and maybe preparing for that. Yeah.
So I would actually echo what Vineet said. I did a little bit of research into the work of the panel members, and then I also sort of created a really long table of all the possible questions that could be asked in multiple different sort of under multiple themes. So, you know, what could be asked about my fit with the criteria, or what could be asked about why I want to do this at Cambridge, or what could be asked about my research topic. And so that sort of helps organize your mind a bit and can get you a bit more prepared as well. Now, the next question is, what kinds of questions were asked? We've kind of hinted at this already, but Emma.
So I hope Professor Everett, who's our provost, does not mind me sharing, but most of my very short interview was an argument with him about over-medication and ADHD. And we really treated it as an academic debate, and it was interesting and it was fun and it was heated, and we had a great time debating each other. And afterwards I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I just argued with the provost for the entire interview and then stated my favorite viola piece. I am never getting in. But it turns out that that was actually, apparently, a perfectly acceptable interview to have. And I think one thing they are looking for is intellectual curiosity. I mean, you're coming here to Cambridge to do an MPhil or a PhD. So if you can show why you're interested and that you've thought deeply about the topics, even if it's not in the way that you were expecting when you walked in the door, I think it can go okay.
So for me, at least, I was very worried initially that the interview was going to be, you know, just a bunch of technical questions being thrown at me. But actually, I found that it was an enjoyable conversation, and I felt quite relaxed after it was over. I felt like I just had a, you know, very genuine discussion with old friends. But also the How We Select page on the Gates Cambridge website has an overview of the different interview sections, and I felt like my interview really corresponded to those. So the first one is sort of what you know about Gates Cambridge, why you're applying, and then why you're a good fit. And then it ends, and then the middle is academic and career plans. And then it ends with a space for asking your own questions. So if there's something you want to know about the scholarship or about life at Cambridge, then you can ask your interviewers there. Vineet?
Yeah, my panel also focused quite a bit on why I applied to this specific program I applied to at Cambridge. And beyond just my interest in that field, they asked me a lot about even like what research projects I would undertake as part of my course, because it was part research, and about whether I wanted to continue on to the PhD because it was a research course. And I had my departmental interview a few months before that. So I found it that it was good to like maintain an open mind about whether you were going to go into industry or pursuing onto the PhD. So I think the Gates, at least my panel, look favorably upon being like open-minded towards continuing on to the PhD at Cambridge, because that is something that at least my course tries to do. They try to convert a lot of people onto the PhD program.
I guess if no one else has anything to add, then we'll move on to the Q&A section. So thank you to everyone so far for providing such helpful advice and tips. The following questions have been sent in by potential applicants through our Instagram, which is at gatescambridge.scholars. Please follow us. So let's get going with that. The first question is, what's the most important thing to get this scholarship, would you say?
Really hard.
Just from so I actually talked to my supervisor of my course about, I don't know in what context, but in his point of view, it was the ranking, the departmental ranking. I don't know the exact number, but you have to be close to the top. And then once you get filtered and sent to Gates, then it's kind of like or it's relatively easier, because the interview is pretty like, it could go either way. It's a very short interview. So there's many factors involved, but it's a much smaller pool compared to the very large number of applications. It does get filtered quite a bit by the departmental rankings. So in my opinion, that would be the most important factor.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Emma?
I think I think departmental rankings are probably one of the biggest things to put you on top of the pile that gets sent then to Gates. But also I think you really need to work on your personal statement. I mean, you cannot underestimate the importance of the Gates personal statement. The first time around, this is embarrassing, I just wrote it in one sitting in the application. I didn't realize how serious it was. It's very serious. It's a very big part of your application. You should have multiple drafts. You should have multiple people read it. And yeah, I can't emphasize enough how worthwhile it is to spend time on the personal statement or the Gates essay or whatever it's technically called.
Yeah, when you talked about drafts, I think I had more than 10 different drafts. So yeah, that's definitely something important. Alex?
Building on that is personal statement, start early, start thinking about it months in advance, build a few drafts, scrap them. That happened to me as well. I ended up like scrapping it and rewriting it the last weekend before the submission. It was probably, I think it was a good idea. And that's when I decided to become way more personal about the story I wanted to tell. And I think that's the other thing is be coherent. And I came from the industry, right? So like academia was 4 years behind me. And so like I needed to be coherent and this is what I've been doing. This is my passion. This is why I think I've acquired like a capacity to like deliver on my passion, but this is what I'm missing. And this is what the program could bring to me. And also tie this all in some sort of like personal story. It will take a few drafts to get to something, ask for feedback. But again, like as Emma said, the personal story, the personal statement, and make sure that your passion speaks out in it.
Marina?
So I think so far all of us have kind of split the process into two components, right? There's that first hurdle, which is getting ranked by your department and getting ranked high enough to be passed on to Gates. And then Gates's process of processing your application. And there's a piece of writing that goes with each one of those steps. So the piece of writing that goes for the department step will be your research proposal or whatever work you've done for the department. And then as everybody has mentioned, the personal statement is sort of after that initial culling process takes place, you're passed on to Gates. So I think just focusing on both of those pieces of writing and the fact that they need to do something quite different, right? If you're applying for a PhD, especially, that research proposal needs to be pretty specific, pretty technical, needs to talk about what resources you need, what resources you'll be doing, and then, you'll be using. And then the personal statement, as everybody said, needs to sort of tell the story. So I think it's really important to have a clear sense of the separate roles that those two pieces of writing need to play.
Let's now throw it back to what was the most difficult part of the process? I guess I'll go first. For me, I think the most difficult part of the process for any scholarship is applying, is just sort of gathering the courage to apply. You need to, you never know if you're going to get it if you don't put yourself out there. So for me, that was probably the most difficult, but also the most worthwhile part of the process. Vineet?
For me, obviously the statement, it was a very different kind of statement compared to like all the other grad school applications that I had submitted. So I spent a lot of time working on that. But beyond that, even the references, in addition to the academic references, I had some trouble deciding on who exactly to choose for the Gates reference. And at the end of the day, I would think that there's no like wrong or right answer as long as that person can be a strong advocate. And it doesn't matter from what I learned later on that it doesn't matter like exactly what their role or position is. It matters on how much credibility they have and how strongly they can speak on behalf of you. So I had some difficulty like settling on the right person or the perfect person for that job. Yeah.
Marina?
I found the waiting to be really difficult. It's a really long process. So applying from the US meant that my application, I think, was due October 6th, and I'd been working on it for several months before. And then we got our final decisions, I think in mid-February. So it's the better part of a year that you're going through these different stages of hearing back and waiting and hearing back and waiting. And I have no way to make anybody feel better about that other than that you just have to keep living your life and try to compartmentalize and try not to focus on it when those deadlines aren't imminent.
And realize you can always try a second time. So you don't always have to worry while you're having this long wait that this is your all or nothing. You can try again and you might even be successful the second time.
The next question, I think, is one that we were all thinking when we were applying, and that's, what role do colleges play and how do you choose one? Vineet.
So I chose my college not based on gates as such. I don't, and to my knowledge, I don't know if it affects the application in a strong way. I just chose it based on what kind of college I wanted to be part of, and also importantly, what kind of funding opportunities your college might have in case you don't get shortlisted for gates. So in addition to your department and other centers, your college could have a lot of funding available. So those were the factors that I considered. So I ended up choosing St. Edmunds because of those factors.
Alex?
I think for me, college was such a confusing thing. I had no idea what it was. I had no idea where to start. Thankfully, I had a friend who had applied, who went to Cambridge, and she gave me some recommendations. I chose the college she had applied to. I chose St. John's, and I would say that like the colleges are kind of, I mean, I'm sure all of you have used this analogy, but they're the Harry Potter's houses. It's at least at the graduate level, it's not where your classes are, but it's where you'll have your cafeteria, your social events. There's gymnasiums. You have like facilities. There's a lot of things that happen in your college, and I think it is important to think about it thoroughly. But again, like I have multiple friends who didn't take the time to choose a college, and they absolutely loved their college. So I think in the end, it's like no matter which one you choose, you're gonna have a great experience, and don't worry too much about making the exact right choice, because I think they all have something very unique to bring.
Marina?
Something to think about as well potentially is that sometimes supervisors like their supervisees to be in the same college as them. For practical reasons, they might have a better capacity to find funding for you from within the college, or to help you find funding if things don't work out with Gates. So it's worth asking them if they have an opinion. But I'm not at the same college as my supervisor, and it wasn't a problem.
Emma?
I'm probably the odd man out, it seems, in the sense that I don't really affiliate with my college that much and have still had a wonderful Cambridge experience. But doing it again, I would have paid more attention to what kind of accommodation they offer. And that's especially for anybody who might be coming with a partner or a family. Accommodation differs so much between colleges, and it's information that is very easily accessible on their website. And also not only the quality of the accommodation, where it is and whether they can take partners, but also the cost. So there are just some colleges, and I will not name names, that just charge you way more than other colleges. So that's something to carefully consider if you're thinking about living in college accommodation.
Just a few other things that I'd like to add in terms of factors for consideration. Things like location. If you prefer to be near your department, then definitely look for colleges around that area. Size, there's some very small colleges and there's some very big colleges in terms of student population. So, if having a nice, small close-knit community is something that you like, then maybe look into that. Demographics is another thing. Cambridge has 3 female-only colleges. There's also some colleges that are only for mature students. So that might also be something to consider. And then food, if you have very specific dietary requirements, then you might want to do some research on that as well. The next question we've touched upon, but let's just clarify this here again, is what documents are needed to apply for this scholarship? I can take that one. So there's two kinds of documents. There's one kind that the department wants, and then there's one that you need for the Gates Cambridge application. What the department wants varies according to the department that you're applying to. And so for that, you should check the postgraduate admissions website. But usually it'll be something along the lines of, at least for a PhD student, you'll need a research proposal, you'll need a CV, you might need a writing sample, and then 2 academic references. And for the Gates Cambridge Scholarship, you need 1 Gates Cambridge statement, which is that 500-word personal statement, and 1 Gates Cambridge reference. Let's move on to the next question. Are scholars offered any training or professional development? Emma.
Yes, loads. So I'll make a quick plug here for Learning for Purpose, which is a part of our Scholars Council, which oversees the scholarship. And Learning for Purpose has, I believe, the biggest budget out of any of us. And so there's a huge emphasis on training and personal development. And this year, a lot of it has been online, but that's ranged from how to write an editorial and get it published, to how to program in R, to how to be a good listener has been one of them as well. And so the range of activities that Learning for Purpose puts on is really impressive, and it's been something that I've enjoyed as part of the scholarship.
It's actually really great, Emma, that you mentioned Learning for Purpose, because I was going to mention them too. Just to sort of build upon some of the things that they offer. I've been to, writing communication workshops, public engagement workshops. The first aid workshop that they offer is also super popular. They have to often offer it multiple times as well. But that's also in addition to the university's own researcher development program, which provides professional development training as well. Next question. What is the social life like within the scholarship? Vineet.
I found the social, in addition to all the funding and the professional opportunities, the social life was definitely a highlight. It's really quite amazing. You come in a few weeks earlier before anyone else comes to Cambridge, and then you go on the retreat to the Lake District, and it's amazing. Oh, within like 3 or 4 days, you already have this group of like 80 to 90 people that you're all friends with, and then you have like your groups within that. And many of those like persisted throughout the year, at least for my year. And you have like different communities within that. Gates puts on like a ton of social events when things were in person, but we had everything from like Lunar New Year to, I can't even remember, but like we had so many events. And also there's like the formal social events that are organized by the council. We went to Harry Potter World, but even just the informal, like the book club, and there's just like so many different sub-communities within Gates, and like really complements like your communities within your college and your course as well.
Just to give a few more examples, so the Scholars Council hosts the Gates Gala, and there's also subsidized activities. I think there's rock climbing as well, and then there's trips to London and other places, like you mentioned, Harry Potter World. There's also movie nights and potlucks that happen regularly as well. And then there's the book club, which actually coincidentally Marina leads. So Marina, do you wanna go ahead?
Shameless plug for book club. But yes, I think it's great that the social component of the Gates Council has a budget that scholars can apply to tap into if they think there's some kind of lacuna in our social programming that they want to fill. So a friend of mine and I in Gates decided that there was some space for people to get together and discuss fiction. And the social council was willing to provide us with a budget so that we could get meeting space and provide people with snacks, and everybody could get together to read books. And that was just something we wanted to do, and they facilitated it for us. So it was really wonderful. And there are a lot of different groups that can develop organically in that way. I know that there was a creative writing group at one point. So basically, if you're really interested in something and other scholars are too, you can get some funds and create a structure to make it happen.
Next question. Is there any prioritized course to be applied for every year? As in, does any one program get, is it more likely that applicants to that one program will get the Gates Cambridge Scholarship? And the answer is no. As long as you are eligible, as long as you meet the 4 criteria, as long as you have a good Gates statement, Gates reference, you have as much chance as getting in for getting in as anyone else. Is there any age limit to apply for the Gates Cambridge Scholarship? No, there is no age limit. Anyone of any age can apply. Is it better to have a more established supervisor, or is it okay to have a more junior academic? And does that affect chances of getting the Gates Cambridge Scholarship? I think I can take this question. Overall, I don't think the seniority of your supervisor has any impact on your chances of getting the Gates. I think it's just something that you might want to think about yourself. You know, someone more established might have more supervisees to take care of, and if you want more of a one-on-one experience, then maybe a junior supervisor might be a better choice. Should applicants get the letter of acceptance from the university first before applying for the scholarship? No. Marina.
Yeah. So basically you apply, Hafsa mentioned this earlier, but the application process all happens at once. So when you're applying to the university, you're also submitting your Gates application. Intuitively, if you are not admitted to your program, you cannot then be offered a Gates scholarship. So in theory, you would be admitted to the university prior to receiving the scholarship, but you wouldn't have control over that. So you submit them at the same time.
Alex, I think you could speak to this. Do I have to apply for a master's right after my bachelor's, or can I work for a few years before that?
You can do whatever you want. You don't have to apply immediately after. I think the answer to that also depends on perhaps like your own objective. I knew that I would end up going back to the industry. My program was specific to that, so it was also like it was actually good to have some industry experience. So just maybe be aware of this. But no, you don't have to do a master's immediately after. And I know some people in the Gates Scholarship that went straight from bachelor's to PhD as well. I think that's possible. I cannot speak for that, but all sorts of routes are possible.
Let's round off with a nice, wholesome question. What is the best thing about studying at Cambridge? Emma.
I think for me, it's the freedom to have 4 funded years to pursue anything that I want. So I'll take the quite academic route. I mean, the social stuff is great and the book club is great, but really it's quite special. And I don't think at any other point in my life, I want to go on to academia and stay in academia after this. And I cannot think of another point in my life where I'll have this kind of funded freedom. So I think that's a really special thing, and I'm very, very grateful to Gates for it.
Vineet.
I only spent a year there for my MPhil, but I really enjoyed the program. I think it really like solidified what I wanted to do later on. But I guess the thing I remember most is just Cambridge as a place, getting to study there and being fully funded. It was an experience that I don't think I'll ever have in my life. There's so much history. There's so many weird quirks and traditions that I got to be a part of with your college, with your department, and just like the community, not just within the Gates, but also my program cohort. I really enjoyed like the kind of the work-life balance. I think that might be a European-wide thing. That was something that I was not used to growing up that I did and going to school in the US before that. So that kind of work-life balance and the heavy emphasis on actually having like a social life and getting to know people around you was something that I enjoyed a lot. Yeah.
Marina.
Going from like the nerd perspective here, just some of the materials I've had the opportunity to work with. I mentioned earlier that Cambridge has spectacular resources, and I work with early modern texts and just manuscripts that we have that, you know, are not easy to come by. You can just make an appointment at the library and they plop the manuscript in front of you and you can work with it and you can touch it with your bare hands, which feels insane. And just the fact that like I can access these resources and I get to spend 4 years writing about them is pretty amazing, pretty spectacular.
I think for me, the greatest thing about studying at Cambridge is that you know, you exist on multiple planes, kind of. You're part of your college, and then you're part of the Gates Cambridge community, and you're part of your department as well. So just having, you know, friends in each of those places is just is great. I think that brings us to the end of this session. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for taking the time out to share your advice. I'm sure it's going to be of great help to potential applicants. For those of you who are applying, good luck. Thanks for tuning into this discussion session. Bye.